This is the Slots and Sockets Podcast, episode number 67. I am one of your hosts, IRD Moose, and my partner in crime.
Sorry, the 7 is kind of slow on my Turbo Penguin.
You're losing your sevens. Happy Monday, Turbo, and
happy belated Father's Day for everybody out there.
Indeed, and I guess losing your sevens kind of comes with old age, so
Hey, you've lost your sevens a long time ago. That's all.
Oh, way long time ago. Yeah, I haven't had them for years. So we've got a couple of fun, interesting stories that came across the desk today. I think the one we want to kick it off with is Nvidia is kind of leaning on their partners to fix the melting 12-volt high power.
It's really interesting because Asus has, without fixing it, has alerted and tried to at least mitigate some of the issues. I'm wondering if there's got to be some power requirement that Nvidia has that they have to comply with, because Asus goes through a lot of trouble to fix but not fix the 5090 power, because it still goes through the tube, but it is very interesting how the card is sensing the wires coming in, even though it still feeds it through the two separate circuits. That's it. Right. All of them go through two. And it's got to be a design flaw. You have MSI, I think it's MSI that came out with the bright yellow connectors, and Lian Li that came out with the bright blue connectors on their cables. And let's see, which one is one of them? Maybe it's Gigabyte that actually has the little LEDs on it. It's like
Zotac. Zotac has the LEDs, yeah. And Asus system so far seems to be the most robust as long as you install their software, which that's another tale to talk about.
If it saves you from burning up a card, it's not the end of the world.
Especially if it's a $3,500 card. Like, good grief.
So, like, all the AIBs have kind of done, at least tried to do their due diligence, trying to at least minimize some of this risk. And it makes sense because that's going to minimize the RMAs that they get back. I wonder if there's some sort of agreement that Nvidia and AIBs have, or if it's just Nvidia's like the AIBs just get to deal with it because that's part of making video cards. No idea. But the Hall of Fame manufacturer, which I'll have to admit we do not see here in the States, I have always appreciated the Hall of Fame video cards. They tend to be looking pretty good. They always have had the white one, and I really like that white Hall of Fame.
It is a pretty card.
It is pretty. But they have a new feature where if the card senses a bad connection or a poor connection, or if it's getting an imbalanced load on the power side, the LEDs start flashing yellow or red. And so it's taking the step further because, like, let's be honest, with the Asus stuff, you have to install their software, and then it pops up and says bad things are happening. Now, the downside to the Hall of Fame version is that it flashes, and if your GPU isn't like right next to you, then you don't see it and you fry your card because you weren't looking at your card while you were playing video games because you're trying to shoot bad guys. So it's an interesting take. I still am under the assumption that AMD or that Nvidia could absolutely just fix this with a little pop-up on a driver level and be like, your power is bringing in uneven power. Connect and limit the power intake to and make a pop-up that instead of getting 600 watts, you're getting 450 or 400 watts, or your card is way too hot. Turn it off and come back again later. But that would also be them acknowledging their failures from a design perspective, so that won't happen.
Yeah.
So AIBs are the best.
And And at this point, they're so locked into that design that, Nvidia being able to add that at the driver level now would be next to impossible unless they either came up with an add-on piece of hardware that either sensed the temperature at the connectors or
Well, they have no way of
monitored the
knowing. Yeah,
power. Yeah,
they
because
have
it
no
just all
way.
dumps. Well, from their reference design, it all dumps into the one common power rail. So, if ASUS departs from that by adding sense resistors in line, I think they do it the 3080 or 3090 style, where they run two rails into the sense resistor and then it goes into Nvidia's big power input block. And that's how they're able to detect, hey, you've got an overcurrent situation here, you need to stop. This doesn't look like it's doing that. This looks like it's, at least based on the sparse information that we have at the moment, it looks like this is looking at power coming in from the PCI Express slot to give you the red error, and it's looking at the 16 pin connector not necessarily being fully seated. So it's potentially looking at the shortened pins and saying, oh, wait, this is a 600-watt card, but I'm only seeing 3 of the pins connected. So you need to jam that sucker in better. But the thing is, while good and absolutely a great idea to add, it doesn't solve the issue because we've seen multiple instances of 4090 and 5090 connectors melting that were properly installed. And the issue was replicable by Gamers Nexus, Jay's Two Cents, and Der Bauer, all three of them. And if anybody knows how to plug in a PCI Express connector, it'd be those guys because they do it about as many times a day as I've done in my entire lifetime.
It
It's
just goes back to a poor design. I mean, there's
yeah,
nothing else to say about this other than it's a bad design. Unfortunately, Nvidia doesn't feel like it's a real problem, so they're not going to fix it.
yep.
It will be interesting to see from an engineering perspective if they make changes on future cards. But I would make the argument they had opportunities to change these cards when you had the 5060 Ti, the 5060 come out, you could have quietly changed, and they didn't. They
Mhm.
just kept it the same. So it'll be interesting to see if they quietly change on the next GPU or if they just keep rolling with the same.
I
Um,
expect they will keep the same for Blackwell, but they do, kind of to your point, they have an opportunity with the upcoming 5080 Super to potentially build in a fix for this, though the 5080 isn't the card that tends to melt connectors because it's, that's a 400-watt card. That's well within the spec. It's still possible, but far less likely. And so that's kind of where I think if they were to do a trial run on a system that could alert you through the driver, that would be a good option to do it because they'd be able to gather data on whether they're seeing power imbalances on a 5080 that could potentially lead to a meltdown. Because we have seen some cases with 4080s melting down, but because it's well within that power envelope, a lot of the speculation around that has been mostly, maybe you didn't install it quite right, or you had too much bend on the cable back when they had the really stiff 12-volt high power cables or 12-volt 2+6 cables.
mhm.
Stuff's getting better now with the cables where they're a lot more flexible and a lot easier to route. But the first batch of cables, those were a pretty big pain, and you could, getting your wiring all nice and tidy, you could accidentally pull your connector part way out without it actually disconnecting the latch too. So it's it's unfortunate that they haven't done anything about it for Blackwell yet, but I'm hoping they do. I don't know that they will, but you know, hope for the best and prepare for the worst, right?
Yeah, I don't. I think like everybody else, I think we've all just kind of written off that 50 series sort of sucked. 40 series
Yeah.
was less sucky, but still sort of sucked. And I just don't have faith that they won't make the 6000 series sucky. So we'll see.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, we won't know what it will be like until parts start hitting the pavement again. And of
so
course, we know it's going to be a GPU shortage when it does. So, yay.
part one of the things that we also saw, a little nugget from eBay, was an engineering sample from obviously Nvidia because it's a 3080 Ti, and said video card had 20 gigs of memory. So again, I have come to the absolute realization, and I'm calling it now: do not buy a 6000 series card.
Hmm.
Buy the 6000 refresh. Don't
Yep.
buy a 5000 series card. Buy the 5000 series refresh. The stock cards are just neutered cards of what they really should be. The 3080 Ti here is, it obviously looks, I don't think we have any testing on this, but it does have 20 gigs instead of 12. And it just goes to know that NVIDIA knew that the 12 was going to be an issue. Why they didn't make this, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I will say NVIDIA knew that this was an issue. It knew it's their pain point. Um, and the issue, the what's crazy, and this is what's nuts, is it actually has an NVIDIA Founders Edition 3080 Ti box.
Hmm.
Typically
I mean, it looks
speaking,
finished. It,
typically speaking, the engineering samples that I've dealt with in the past have been just that, just a base card. Sometimes they don't even have um, any markings of what it is. Like you have to have like a decoder, like the old Intel CPUs, the engineering samples.
yeah.
It is what it is, but you have to actually look at those codes and actually understand what it is you've got and have a translation of what you've got. But the other weird thing on those is that those were completely unfinished CPUs. So sometimes you would have certain bits or pieces not work well or
Hmm.
work right. Because it wasn't taped out. This is unique in that you have a finished box, you have a completely unreleased video card, and from the looks of it, it looks like it's working. Now, I'm sure somewhere along the lines, we may or may not see drivers for said 3080 Ti, or we may not see full potential out of that. But you got to think with that extra 8 gigs of RAM that obviously it's going to be faster.
Yeah.
So
Well, and the other thing too is it looks like it's mostly complete. Now, what's entirely possible here, we don't know for sure, is if that box is the box it came in, or if that's a box that just a different Founders Edition 3080 Ti box that somebody stuck it in. It's entirely possible because usually they don't come with retail packaging, like you were saying. The other thing I find interesting is it's missing the back plate, and there are thermal pads on the power stages on the back of the card. And it looks like there's residue from thermal pads on the back memory as well. And that tells me that they may not have had a back plate that was compatible with that much memory on the card. And it's possible that they were about to get it out and they're just like, you know what? No, we're just gonna stick with what it is. But
it
yeah,
was probably getting too close to the 3090.
it more than likely. Yeah.
I bet you that's what it is. And they're like, no, it's too close to the 3090. We want to keep selling 3090s. So we're not going to release this and we're going to put it at 12 because it's the only way for us to keep
Yep.
the two series, those classes different.
Yep.
But this is, I mean, absolute proof that NVIDIA does this on purpose. They knew that this was the pain point of this card and they still sold it. And I would make the argument that, like the 5070, they know about that. It's another way for them to artificially bring the performance into a price and a performance point. And then the other half of it is they know that they're going to make these cards absolutely useless
Yep.
because without the VRAM, it really is going to struggle here. It already is, but it's really going to struggle here in the next 2 or 3 years to the point where I think the 5070 is just going to go down. It's like, well, if it had 12, or the other half I could see is where you see users look at buying these up and then send them off to have upgrade RAM put into them. I
Yeah.
don't know how that might work well with the 5070 because the 5070 Ti does already have 16, so it
Mm-hmm.
might work. Who knows?
Well, and that's the
But
thing is a lot of times, you run into situations where these cards weren't necessarily intended to have that much memory off the bat, but if you toss the memory in, it would use it. We've seen that with the 1080 Ti, and we've seen it with other 3080s where people
yeah,
just been like, I'm going to put some more memory on here, and hey, it works. It says it's a 16 gig card now, or it says it's a 20 gig card. And
we'll use it. That's the other question.
yes,
But
they do seem to use it. And that's the thing is that's the very interesting thing is that the drivers don't hard code how much memory these cards have, at least not yet. But if this starts becoming a thing, I fully expect Nvidia to lock these cards down and refuse to run if you have more memory than that card than Jensen intended you to have.
we'll see. I don't
They
know.
have done that before. They've done it with LHR. They've done it with AI processing, where the first run of 30 series was a good example of that with LHR. Up to a certain point, you could buy a 3060 and get full crypto mining performance, but then the next batch of cards they come out with are LHR cards, and you can only use half your GPU for that until some enterprising individual hacked the driver and worked around it, and Nvidia's like, ah, crap.
Yeah.
So yeah, expect this war to go on if upgrading memory on graphics cards becomes popular. But speaking of
Uh,
upgrading,
upgrading. Okay, so wait, this is best. Okay. We have a new world record.
new
Did you know
world
that?
record.
New
No, I
world
did not
record.
hear that.
The most CPU and APUs on a single socket.
Ooh.
AM4 has beaten itself. AM4 again. And I don't
AMD's
understand.
beating itself. That is
They beat
taken out of
itself.
context.
Stop beating yourself.
Yeah, yeah. That's the old line from
But
NASCAR. That's what we're going
yeah,
with. Don't beat yourself.
yep. Um, AMD has quietly released a new AM4 processor, the 5500X3D. Now you think to yourself, it must have only 4 cores. Nope, it still has 6. It is the same core count. It is the same 3D cache amount is the 5600X3D. The difference is 300 megahertz. Now, I don't understand why the urge to have 145 CPUs on AM4 is something that, like, are they going for 150? Like, is it they're like, okay, we got 5 more left? Is it like an
Mhm.
internal like struggle? I don't get it. And I don't really understand this because the 5600X3D is still out there.
Mhm.
Apparently, this is targeted towards our South American and Latin America um, friends. I don't understand why because I don't know what this is priced at. It has the same 105-watt TDP, um, and at 300 to 400 megahertz slower, it just seems really dumb. Like, is this just a 5600 X3D where they scratch off the five and put off the 6 and put a 5?
Yeah, that's what
Um,
it sounds like. I mean, they're
and
just
then they
binning it lower.
spinning it lower. But the problem is, I didn't really think that there was a desire for those chips. And why wouldn't you then make, I don't know, a 9600 X3D like on try to sell a motherboard?
Well, so that we're kind of at a point in AM4's lifespan where the boards now are just getting stupid cheap, and you can find them anywhere used too.
Well,
And I'm
hold up.
talking like
Can
high end
you? So
boards.
hold up. Can you actually find them? because last time I looked, and I was like, okay, if I need to build a cheap um desktop, on the boards, on the board,
So that was, I
and
think B450 was the top chipset for that one, right? Or maybe it was
well,
B550.
570 was the top.
Well, I was on the budget side. Yeah. So
Oh
B550
yeah,
would be the top budget side. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking here. I see a whole slew of pages of boards. The first couple boards are 119,
there's
109 for
13.
gigabyte.
Yeah, there's
So they,
13 boards. They're
yeah,
all, they are all the B and A series cards. There's no more X's. Um, but there are 11 B550 boards out there. They are more budget friendly, so maybe there's a use for that. I mean, in all honesty, um, AMD says this about the most legendary chipset socket. This is just proof it's they're right.
yeah.
Um, I don't think we'll ever have another chip or a socket that goes that long. I mean, 9 years is just
It's crazy. Yeah. No,
crazy.
well, and it's a testament to the fact that they did a really good job engineering AM4, and AM5 looks like it's just as strong if not stronger. Cuz normally if we were looking at potentially seeing a new socket on AMD, people would start talking about it around now. Like, hey, there's we're seeing evidence of a new LGA socket for AMD, but the only new socket we've seen has been for the Threadripper stuff and for Epic. So, yeah, I mean, I think we could potentially see another two sockets in a row where AMD just keeps churning out stuff. And the beautiful thing about this is that, you can still get B550 boards, you can still get a couple of X570s. They are a lot higher on the pricey range, but mostly what seems to be available now is B550. And realistically, for AM5, you don't need the X570. It really doesn't add anything. B550 is good. You can still get some B450 boards that support it. And, if you're talking about buying in those regions where, you know, buying the AM5 stuff is out of range, for most people, then yeah, I think it makes sense to release a lower end part like this. And if you're already using the yield, if you've already got it, why not do it? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but I think it kind of makes sense. I mean, in all honesty, for a gamer on a extreme budget or in areas where graphics and computer parts are expensive, obviously a 5500 X3D is going to do very well.
Hmm.
Originally, I thought this was going to be more focused towards like AIB partners, like as budget gamers.
Maybe.
Because I can see AIB's loving this, be like, it has X3D. Yeah, there's no upgrade path, by the way, but it's got
Yeah.
X3D,
Like a modern version of e-machines. Like it's
Yeah, exactly.
forever upgradable, never obsolete.
Yeah, exactly. But
Which is funny because AMD's proving that AM4 still isn't obsolete. Um,
the
but yeah.
honest truth is that for somebody with a 3600X, if you could grab yourself a 5500 X3D, that is a sizable upgrade.
Hmm.
3700X, 3800X. Again, depending on what you're using it for, it actually does have some really good use for it. So,
Yeah, or
um,
my mom would be a good use case for that because she's still running on my old 2700X,
that
and
yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
for a gamer, I think that's where X3D shines for
right?
sure.
Yeah, and all my mom does is watch YouTube streams. So hi, mom. She's probably watching this now, uh, after we upload it. But
Yeah,
yeah, the for her, I'm actually looking at going to a 5700G just so I can end of life her 970 that I have in there. But yeah, I mean, if she was doing any kind of gaming, but I didn't want to spend the money on a part, yeah, I would probably go with the 55 or 5600 X3D just because they're cheap. And that's the beauty of AM5. It's cheap
Truthfully,
because
is that Moose wants to buy an Intel Arc so he can say he's owned an Intel Arc processor.
I you know, I
He is an Intel fanboy.
there is some truth to that. Not because I'm a fanboy, but because I like what Intel's doing with Arc. And there have been some interesting rumors, but nothing super concrete about a
No.
potential B770. But you know, that is something again that kind of remains to be seen. Because we're not really seeing any major sites or major leakers coming out with anything about it. So, you know, it could be like the 3080 where that we spoke about earlier, where it's just a one-off or a prototype that's near production ready and they just scrapped it. That's entirely possible because we don't know what Intel's plans are.
Intel doesn't know what their plans are. In all
That's
honesty,
fair.
they just don't know.
They're winging it.
They are.
They're just like, oh, hey, that's stuck. Let's sell more of them.
Yeah, until the next Intel, AMD, and Nvidia like, oh yeah, about that.
Yeah, Intel's still a thing. They're like, hey, we're still here, guys. Honest. So
and on that bombshell, that Intel is still here.
Yeah, on that bombshell. Thank you all for watching. We appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time today. And do remember to jump down the comment section below, leave us a message there, and give us a like and a subscribe and all that fun algorithmic goodness to kind of pump up those numbers because they're rookie numbers. Right?
They are.
So
we'll get them.
Until next time, have fun storming the castle.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.